Star Wars Hunters has one of the strangest existences out of any Star Wars game ever. Today we're going to talk about that. I'm going to do a brief news roundup as well, because we actually do have news to talk about for once. It's been obviously a pretty dead time for Star Wars since the release of the Ahsoka Season 1 finale, but as of today, really this morning at 12:01, the SAG-AFTRA strike has ended, meaning that actors can return to not just acting, but also promoting the projects they're in, talking about the project. So we've seen, for example, Iman Esfandi talking about his job as Ezra in Ahsoka, which is just great. But anyway, the Star Wars Hunters news. Zynga Star Wars put out an update saying, "Dear Hunters, we are hard at work bringing our vision of Star Wars Hunters to life, TM, and we are committed to creating the best experience for our players. To ensure we meet the highest level of quality, we have made the difficult decision to delay the worldwide launch of Star Wars Hunters until 2024. This is a game which has existed in a soft launch state for like a year. Star Wars Hunters was meant to release in 2021. Realistically, considering it's a mobile game, 2024 probably would have been near the end of its life cycle. The delay was pulled back, however, that notwithstanding, it did still see a soft launch in several countries, including, I think most notably, India and perhaps Australia as well. A soft launch simply means that the game's been launched in these specific regions, but is not available broadly. Obviously, more delays happen, but what's really weird is that the soft launch has actually been ongoing. Like, they didn't just launch the game in its initial state, then leave it at that. Rather, it's been getting updates, they've been releasing new heroes or champions. It's just really bizarre. I'm not super excited for Star Wars Hunters, to be honest, anyway. It seems to be kind of like a hero shooter. It'll be free to play, available on the Switch and also on mobile. Not saying it'll be bad, but I mean, every time it gets delayed, I just think that once we finally do get the game, it's going to feel even more dated. So I don't know. It's just an extremely odd situation. I am personally not confident that the game will ever leave soft launch, or that I'll ever get, I guess more accurately, a full proper launch with ongoing support. I think what will probably happen is it will be a similar situation to Lego Star Wars Battles. A lot of you probably haven't heard of that game because it went through a similar situation. It was in soft launch for a while in several countries. It was initially actually meant for a worldwide release, but instead it was released exclusively through the Apple Arcade store, and they didn't really provide it with ongoing updates, which meant the game released basically in its full form, which isn't really bad, but it meant that interest dried out really quickly. It was actually in a way kind of a nice difference. Launching as it did meant that the game was completely free of microtransactions as well, because Apple Arcade games have to be free of microtransactions. But it's clearly a situation where they delayed the launch so long that the conditions for a full profitable launch were no longer met. I will admit, I'm not sure whether or not that's the case for Star Wars Hunters. I think there are a couple of possibilities. For one, they may know more about the future state of games like Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Maybe they will be winding down more in 2024, or more likely, they know that a show is releasing around that time, and the delay, which was announced towards the end of the SAG strike, was simply planned so that it could line up and relaunch alongside whether Ahsoka Season 2 or a Skeleton Crew or The Acolyte, who knows. I mean, that would also make sense because that would mean the most recent delay was also caused by the work stoppage. I feel like at this point the game is destined to be a failure or to not be released widely at all. As I mentioned, I don't even know anything about the game. I haven't went out of my way to get a VPN going and to be in another region and play it like that because I just don't care enough, and I feel like a lot of people will probably have that mindset. So couple that with just the nonsense release windows, it's just a recipe for disaster in my opinion. And this is Zynga. Like, this isn't some little startup company either. This is one of the big mobile game creators. But I gotta say, it's very weird to go on the Zynga Star Wars Twitter account and see the delay announcement right next to the release trailer for a new Trandoshan hero being added to the game, or new quests, or just a bunch of other things. I don't know. Star Wars gaming is in an interesting spot recently. I've got to give credit because I saw this really interesting post. It was from Azatru, who said Star Wars Battlefront 2 was the 16th most downloaded PS4 game last month, according to PlayStation. So obviously there's still interest in that game, and I mean, just generally it seems obvious that there's a big desire for a Star Wars live action game of some sort. Like, we've got all these movies coming out, more movies and more shows rather, and video games, books, comics, whatever, than ever before. It would be so fun if we could play as some of these characters in a game that's not called Fortnite. The closest thing we have right now is Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I've actually kind of turned around on that game a little bit. I don't mind it, but man, it is so greedy, so greedy. They nickel and dime you just every single opportunity they get. But I mean, it's one area where Legends characters are sort of being visible again, and characters from new shows are being featured. We just got Beskar, Moff Gideon. I don't know, it's just, there's a sad history with Star Wars mobile gaming specifically. Star Wars Rise to Power, I think a lot of you probably remember that. I actually saw a little bit of that game. It looked awful. Not surprised it didn't come out. But it was one of those things where, sort of just like Star Wars Hunters, it was in closed testing for a long time. More closed actually than Star Wars Hunters, which actually is being publicly tested now, but never released. Obviously, another good example of a sad Star Wars game, one I've talked about before, Star Wars Force Arena, one of my favorite mobile games of all time, just excellently made, and it's gone. The real tragedy though, Tiny Death Star. Where is that thing? Let me play Tiny Death Star for Christ's sake.